अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाखया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः. He who removes the darkness of ignorance of the blinded by applying the ointment of spiritual knowledge, he opens our eyes. Salutations to that holy Guru. Good morning, namaskara to everybody gathered here, esteemed audience, speakers, participants in the audience. Pranams and salutations to Swamiji. Thank you for having me here among such an honest gathering. When Swamiji called me, I was thinking, what should I say in front of philosophers and seekers of truth? What do I have to present? So I thought that I will present my perspective. It is a perspective that of a social worker. I work with individuals and families in the area of community development and mental health. A large part of my interactions are with very young people. And whatever we have gathered from all these deliberations on philosophy, my aim is to carry this back and apply it in my own field. I would urge and advise you also to please take it back home and apply it in real life and not just leave it at deliberations. So first of all, I would like to begin with this shloka. This is Nirvana Shatakam by Adi Shankaracharya. Mano buddhya hankara chittani naham, na cha shrota jihve, na cha grana netre, na cha vyoma bhumir, na tejo na vayu, chidananda rupa, shivoham shivoham. Na cha prana sangyo, na cha navai panchavayu, nava saptadhatur, nava panchakosha. न वाक्पाणि पादौ न चोपस्थपायु चिदानंद रूप शिवोहम शिवोहम. न मे द्वेष रागौ न मे लोभ मोहौ न मे मदौ नैव मात्सर्य भाव. न धर्मो न चार्थो न कामो न मोक्ष चिदानंद रूप शिवोहम शिवोहम. न पुण्यम न पापम न सौख्यम न दुःख्यम न मंत्रो न तीर्थम न वेदा न यज्ञ. अहम भोजनम नैव भोक्तम न भोज्यम न भोक्ता चिदानंद रूप शिवोहम शिवोहम. न मृत्युर्न शंका न मे जाति भेद पिता नैव मे नैव माता न जन्म न बंधुर न मित्रम गुरुर्नैव शिष्य चिदानंद रूप शिवोहम शिवोहम. अहम निर्विकल्पो निराकार रूपो विबुद्ध्वाच सर्वत्र सर्वेन्द्रियाणां न चासंगतौ न नैव मुक्तिर्न मेय चिदानंद रूप शिवोहम शिवोहम. The whole proposition of this prayer, or I would rather say declaration, is that I don't have to worry about everything because I am not any of these things that try to define me. Given this proposition, we are talking about Kārya and Akārya. In front of this truth, we are talking about what we should do and what we should not do and what constitutes action and inaction. Coming back to a little bit more of local contextual, although historical opinions. Whatever I'm presenting is a series of verses, a series of texts that has inspired me to think in this direction. I am only presenting dots and I'm leaving it up to you how you want to connect it. So Thiruvalluvar in Tirukkural says, Solludal yarkum eliya. Ariyavam solliya ennam seyal. So he says it is easy for anybody to speak about large things. It's very difficult to execute what you've spoken. Then he goes on and says, Uruvugandu ellamai vendum, urul perintherukkum, achani annar udaithu. Even big chariots that run have small linchpins which makes the wheels rotate. So every small part, every human being, every dot, dust, dash, and particle in the universe has its own purpose to fulfill. That is that object, whether animate, inanimate, and a living being, that person's objective and purpose in life. Goes on, says, Tunbam uruvarinum seiga, tunivatri inbam payakum vinai. So while doing this work, there will be several hardships, several challenges, several obstacles, deviations, distractions, but the job is to pursue with firmness. Why I'm citing Tiruvalluvar is because everybody's language and way of looking at it, everybody's sense of humor and perspective is very important when we are talking about something as large as philosophy, purpose of life, how to do things, etc. And we are not on this journey alone. So understanding the context of a person while working with large communities, groups of students, large companies, being leaders, being teachers, parents, family members, even philosophical, I would say people who leave milestones in philosophy. Everybody over here has had a very rich contribution to shaping the discourse. So all of us have a unique perspective, and listening to each other and learning from each other is part of making that story happen. Here, Hazrat Shams of Tabrizi, who is very famously known as the mentor and beloved of Hazrat Rumi, Maulana Rumi, says, God is busy with the completion of your work, both outwardly and inwardly. He is fully occupied with you. Every human being is a work in progress that is slowly but inexplicably moving towards perfection. We are each an unfinished work of art, both waiting and striving to be completed. God deals with each of us separately because humanity is a fine art of skilled penmanship, where every single dot is equally important for the entire picture. And it is easy to love perfection and to want it, but the difficulty consists in loving the human with his good and bad. We mostly know as much as we love. Only loving God but not its creatures, you can never really know, neither really love. So all of this history, rich history and tradition that we carry, what is the context in which we are applying it today? What am I seeing? I am seeing a world full of inequality where there is gender war, power war, religious wars. There's a lot of countries and continents which are existing in a post-colonial haze and a struggle to catch up. There is economic and class inequality. There is politics that is happening in every space that cuts across all of these categories. There's geographical differences. There's technology that is coming that was not there previously, at least not in the terms that we are familiar with these days. And we have our young ones along with this in our journey. So what do we do? What are the disturbances that we see? Guru Nanak beautifully says this in Japji Sahib. अंतु न सिफ्ती कहनी न अंतु न करने देनी न अंतु न वेखनी सुननी अंतु न जापे की मन अंतु न जापे कीता आकारू जापे पारवारू. So the whole conversation over here is that there are a lot of people with a lot of troubles, but on top of all of that, there's just one person and he is appealing to that God whose just glimpse is enough to provide people with whatever they need in whatever format they need. So going ahead, the anxiety, depression, the stress and other health issues, which are usually mocked when we are discussed as in very subtle philosophical discussions, we are aiming for perfection and betterment. But when we see flaws and imperfection and challenges, there is a tendency to mock and there is an absence of empathy. So my first realization would be that these are phases and situations that all of us go through and continue to go through, and we cannot afford to be mocking them at this point. And it is unfortunately the human condition by default. In compare and contrast to the real nature of self, this is the real nature of self that we are dealing with every day, and that's quite tough. The violence and the injustice and the loss and love of care, the isolation that a human being feels, and the disconnect from fellow human beings, the barriers that they have towards self-knowledge, these are the things that prevent people from acting in their own true nature and in true welfare for other people. So when we facilitate social change, we define justice as a social worker. We look at Bhagavad Gita's model, and we look at studying and developing as a community. And we think of leaders who have the insight and the empathy that Krishna had for all the characters in the Mahabharata. We seek to expand awareness about the truth and also look at how other people can cultivate the same thing. I don't need to explain the meaning of these shlokas to this audience, but nevertheless, the right that we have to work is to only work and not be thinking about the fruits of the action, because changes have a ripple effect. We end up influencing other people without even knowing how we are influencing them. Therefore, with a tremendous amount of foresight, a lot of the effects and the consequences of what we are doing, we may not be even around to see what its effects are. Going ahead, Krishna also says, Yaktvatana punarmoham evam yasyasi pandava yena bhutanya sheshena drakshasya atmanyatho mayi. While you act without delusion, you shall find that I exist in everybody. That is a wonderful message, and that is a wonderful perspective to work in the social sector with. That if you end up thinking that what is my right and what am I supposed to do, what is right for me, without thinking about what is better for other people, the thing that is supposed to give you your results will also not happen. So what are the factors? What is the location of change for me as a social worker? It is the individual primarily, but it is also their family. It is also a community, a set of people who identify together and work for their own benefit and welfare. And then there is a larger question of what is Kārya and Akārya in terms of rules and laws that we function in. So a lot of unspoken rules are also there when we talk about an organization, implicit rules that are not talked about. The cunningness, the cleverness, the shrewdness, which is the law of the land, is also a rule and a policy, which creates conflict inside an individual. So how does an individual act within this? If they go completely against it, then they will be penalized by the group that they are coexisting with. So how do we navigate that? So these are specific instances where I get to apply the concepts that we just discussed before. Okay, so this is a shloka that talks about attachment and detachment and how wise men act. So wise men need certain qualities and should have certain capacities. First of all is self-awareness. Second thing is about the power dynamics in any situation. Who has more power? Does rebellion, confrontation, negotiation, argument, persuasion, flattery, there are different ways of creating change. Which one is the apt one in which power dynamic is something that we need to figure out in every given situation. There's no point of losing sight of the collective goal or the larger goal if you just want to prove a point and win. You won the battle but lost the war. Situation happens. So self-awareness about how to act and when to act in those situations is something that facilitates us towards Kārya, proper action. Gratitude and empathy towards all beings. So gratitude and empathy, thinking about that this collective goal towards doing Kārya of any kind is there only because of other people's existence. So gratitude and empathy, even for the toughest rival, enemy, competitor, whoever defines themselves, even if you don't define them as that, they might define that in relation to you, that they are your enemy, they are your competitor, they are your senior, junior, whatever. But empathy and gratitude towards them helps us to put ourselves in their position and think about what is good for them. Can I collaborate about that? And self-regulation, which of course we have so much of literature and knowledge about regulating the body and the mind, how these are instruments in the larger conversation about what we are doing for the common good and the social welfare. Krishna says, Yasya sarve samarambha kama sankalpa varjita jnanagni dagdha karmanam tamahu panditam buddha. So while on this journey, our individual desires and purposes, even if they are for the better good, even if we consider it to be very pure, what ends up happening is that if we are worried about what will happen to me or what will happen to my action, it still restricts us. It still falls within the effects and what will happen to us and what will be our emotional situation after performing that action. However, a wise person is a person who's done their job to the best of their ability and has the maturity to say, I've done my job. Let us have some faith that everything else will be taken care of by the other parts of the instrument in the larger scheme of things. So here in an interaction where there is work to be done together, what kind of communication should be carried out? It should be mindful, should be assertive, where not anybody can come in and take over your time and stop you from doing what you're doing. So you have to assert your boundaries, set your boundaries, communicate your boundaries respectfully. There's also the changes that happen while you're interacting in yourself and in the others. There is a level of emotions, the range of emotions, the up and down that happens with it. There is an immense need for rest and pause. A large part of our time is spent hurrying through a lot of things. So we forget that rest, relaxation, and pause is very important in doing work. And of course, reflection about what is going on internally, externally, between people, between us and the environment. All of that has to be reflected on. And these are skills that need to be developed by everybody and not just people who have knowledge about it. So knowledge transference is also a very big karya that we have collectively taken up on ourselves. For people in power, it is very important that they acknowledge that they are in a place of power, that they have unknown influence on other people, the context of what are the spaces they are occupying, whether they as leaders are humble, have gratitude for being in a place like that, and forgiveness, the room for forgiveness and for improvement, and the courage to face the consequences of their actions and their inactions. Krishna says, Yadyad acharati shreshta tattad devetaro sayat pramanam kurute lokastadanuvartate. The way that great people act, people will look to act like them. Secondly, this is a very funny remark that Krishna makes. Yadi aham na varteyam jatu karmanyendrita mama vartamanu vartante manushya partha sarvasha. If I, as God, do not engage in action, what will happen? People will take it as an indication to relax and not do anything. So that's the reason I am performing action, is what the Lord is saying. So that's also, I think, an interesting concept to reflect on. Why does God have to act? Why does God have to take avatara, come to the world, tell people things, do things? So he says, I also have to do this. Otherwise, the world will perish. And if I don't transfer this ability to you to be able to stay equanimous and perform action, your function will also not happen properly. And therefore, things will go in downhill. This is also a shloka that was brought up in yesterday's discussions and which is a very interesting take on things. Shreyan swadharmo vigna paradharmat vanushtita swadharme nidhanam shreya paradharmo bhayavaha. So what is swadharma? It is not just the job you're doing or your identity. It's also about certain carrying vasanas that are prevailing upon our personality and nature, certain things that don't sit well with our conscience. If we act contrary to what we believe to be the truth and we believe to be the right thing, we automatically don't get the consequences that we are hoping for, because it's not making us comfortable. It is going against our own true nature. So I think this is a very interesting take, And Swami Chinmayananda ji says, comments on this slokas, in its right import, Swadharma means type of vasanas. To act according to one's own taste, inborn and natural, is the only known method of living in peace and joy. To act against it would be acting in terms of paradharma, and that is very dangerous. So I would encourage all of you to think along with me along these terms about all these spaces we occupy where not everybody is coming from the same context, not everybody is aware of Bhagavad Gita, Vedas, Shastras, theories and scholars of philosophy. Not everybody is even educated. Not everybody is able to understand the language of love. Not everybody is a happy person. So when we take all of these things back at work, at home, what happens when people react to us even when we come across with best of intentions? How do we do conflict resolution? How do we create situations that nourish people based on this information, based on this knowledge? I think this is a long journey, and the best definition of Akarya would be to do our job and not really worry because everything is already taken care of. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you, Swamiji, and thank you all speakers.